Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Weathering with You. One thing I really like about Makoto Shinkai's films is that they feel like teenage fantasies. Like films that very much get the vibe and the feel of a teenager, that viewpoint in a completely unironic way. And I sort of get why teenagers in particular, or I guess all people, but in particularly teenagers, fall in love with Your Name and Weathering with You. And with Weathering with You, the whole time it felt like I was reading like high school poetry, but if it was like really good and you really fell in love with it. I felt the same way about Your Name, and I guess this director has never been the same way for me as he is with most people, but I still quite enjoy this director. I did get to see this one like with a kind of a packed theater, and it did feel like maybe it was a more better experience seeing this theatrically, because Your Name, I think I saw it at like a crappier screening or something like that. Weathering with You, it just feels like this kind of unironic take on the passions of teenagers in ways that John Hughes would be embarrassed to do, but I kind of just fell into it in such a way that I felt like if I was 17 watching this, I would think this is maybe the greatest movie ever or something. I would fall into that fantasy, that idea of first love, that idea that fantasy could happen, that amazing things could happen, that your love represents all these things. And the whole idea of this film being that this boy falls in love with a girl who has the magical power to make the sun come out. As in Tokyo at the time, it's raining constantly. It's been raining for like months and months, and it's a huge problem. And people just want the sun to come back because it's been so long. And this girl will come out, and she's called a sunshine girl, and will come out and pray, and then the sun will come out. And this boy who's run away to Tokyo starts with like this kind of cheesy journalist who is writing things, urban legends and stuff, and they're researching sunshine girls, and he kind of actually finds one because a girl helps him out at a McDonald's, giving him like a free Big Mac. I'm not sure it's a Big Mac, but let's say he falls in love with her and kind of realizes she is a sunshine girl, and uses, after helping her get out of like a creepier situation, and then starts a business with her and her younger brother. She prays and sunshine happens, whether it's a festival or an outdoor like flea market, or a kid just wants to play in the park that day and they pay for her services. It seems like it's like not an exact fee because she does it for all sorts of different people, and they fall in love through working with that. And there's various complications through using this power over and over again. And I think the metaphor for any teenage things with fantasy, and I guess, I don't know if Buffy the Vampire Slayer or a superhero like the X-Men or something, or Spider-Man was the first ones, I don't know who, but it was probably Spider-Man. It was the first one to do it, is take teenage problems and kind of make them overly important because they do have world-changing events. And when you're a teenager, certainly it feels like that importance, or at least that importance to you. And I think this film does that incredibly well, doing that kind of teenage fantasy. I don't think I'd fall in love with this director as much as everyone else and Your Name and this, but I still kind of respect and really love what it's doing. Like, I still remember fairly well parts of Your Name years later, and I feel the same way with Weathering with You, because I felt seeing it was such a real investing experience, and in some ways like it felt like it meant as much to me while watching it as it meant to the characters or something. And it felt I was like almost like bathing in this like kind of like nostalgia feeling of my youth through watching Weathering with You, which is not something I think a lot of directors can convey so well. Like, you can go like, oh yeah, I like that song, but I don't like any of these crappy songs he plays through a lot of this, but I definitely got that feeling of youth, that feeling of freeness, that feeling of like, I'm in this city I've never been before, I fall in love with this girl, like we've done this thing, and the stakes are super high and everything like that. Does he sort of twist them in ways that might not be like, the greatest use of that in the world in the end? Yes, definitely. But I think overall most of it is doing that in such a wonderful, splendid way. And I think one of the things that anime in a lot of countries are able to do that America isn't, is there's a lot of times they're doing stuff that if this was an American film, they'd be cynical about it and ironic about it. And this director, Makoto Shinkai, doesn't do that. And I think that I find to be more refreshing. I think in some ways, like the whole idea of like Shrek or Scream or any of that has sort of hurt American media in a lot of ways and kind of accentuated other media, because in some ways you can't be genuine. You almost are embarrassed of being genuine. I've heard that as a complaint on Hollywood films in the last 20 years or so, because they can't be that have your heart on your sleeve kind of thing. And I think Weathering with You has that so much. It's like part of being a optimistic, young person is having your heart on your sleeve and believing you can do all this amazing stuff and like reaching out and like going for these certain things. And that's just so in Weathering with You. You kind of can't rip it out of it. It's such a part of the whole fabric of the film. It's hard, I think, for any filmmaker to really capture that spirit. And what's interesting about Your Name and Weathering with You is I find a filmmaker who's probably better at making teen films than I've seen anyone do since John Hughes. I know everyone seems to be comparing him to Miyazaki, but it's 2 movies, guys. Let's chill. As a filmmaker who's making things about teens and the fantastical stuff, I often find The Girl Who Leapt Through Time to be pretty much better than these movies. I still quite like how he's able to capture that spirit so well, and he's so smart about doing that. I don't know how old this guy is. I'm assuming not very old, but he has such a connection to the way young people feel, which is not something I think a lot of people can do, because it's an impulsive spirit, it's a passionate spirit, and it's the kind of spirit that like believes you can change the world, and you haven't been broken down by the world to realize like, no, most of you probably won't. But in Weathering with You, you believe you can, and you believe in that energy, and you believe in that ability that you can do something, and that you can get out of this, and that your love is going to make everything better, and that this is a very pure, beautiful moment. There's something that I just think this film does so beautifully that is just amazing. I found that to be the most beautiful thing of it. Seeing kids, runaways on the run, is something the cinema loves to do and storytelling loves to do. And I don't know if this is even the best at that, but I like, the secrets it goes with it. It's able to experience a whole new city and experience the wonder of it. And also getting to the kind of urban legend, the whole idea of the Sunshine Girl. And sure, she is like a manic pixie dream girl, but that's sort of part of like the whole thing with it. I mean, I think if there was ever a narrative reason to have a manic pixie dream girl, I think Weathering with You figured it out, which, to be honest, like, I didn't think that while I was watching it. I just thought she was a girl who you would, if I was an awkward guy, and you'd fall in love with, because she showed you kind of a tiny shred of kindness, and to you that was like all the world. And you would, definitely like die for her and do all these amazing things. And after that, of course, because you're young and stupid and passionate and virginal and all these things, and you'll take things way too far because you have no experience. So it just like feels all these things. And in some ways, I think I've come around more from this filmmaker, because the experience of seeing them feels that way, that I can't think of very many films that do that. And way in films that, like, this isn't a film of my youth, this isn't a film that I necessarily is attached to like who I am as a person or something, but when I'm wrapped up in it, I can remember all that again. And I think that's something Weathering with You does excellently well. There's not a lot of filmmakers and not a lot of films that can do that. And well, showing like a different culture, like how this feels about guns in this is like shocking in itself compared to like films I see, as an American in Hollywood, how this is able to do interesting things with water and like illuminate a whole world of weather and, gods and all these things that only sort of hints at, while also continues to be mysterious in a way that's just like kind of makes you sort of believe in all this stuff, but while also not overly explaining it. It's more about these personal relationships. So Makoto Shinkai is probably the teenage filmmaker of our age, and I think he's done it in a way that he's able, probably because of he's in a global warming age, but also because I almost think more about how he's able to get that feeling, that vibe of a teenager, and understand how their brains sort of operate. And I feel like he's one of the few directors who's able to do that better than almost anyone, and almost able to remind you in such a way that you're both embarrassed because you do some of that stuff, but also like so transported to it you feel like you're living it again. Weathering with You is a really fantastic movie, and I'm happy to continue watching this director's films. I don't know if I agree he's the next great amazing filmmaker or something, and I don't know if I like to throw out praise like that, but I do think he's made 2 fantastic motion pictures that every time have kind of wrapped me up into this story and not kind of let me go until it's done. And every time I'm remembering sort of what it was like to be a teen, while he's kind of telling me this fantastical story, and it just feels like kind of very much his own, giving his films kind of this just like pleasantly teenage experience that I think few filmmakers have ever been able to achieve. So if you have seen Weathering with You and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.